If you found a note that let you live another person's life, even for a day, would you explore its mysteries or fear the consequences? The gallery was suffused with an unsettling chill, cool rays of fluorescent light slicing through the fog of murmurs and shuffled feet. Alex Turner, lanky and clad in an oversized, paint-stained jacket, stood rigid near his latest piece, a sprawling canvas obscured by the gallery's harsh, sterile glare. The walls, stark and bland, seemed to swallow his work whole. Murmurs of skepticism drifted in the air like wisps of smoke, intangible yet suffocating. A woman's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the din. "Is this supposed to be art? It looks unfinished, more like a child's sketch." Laughter, low and dismissive, fluttered among the gathered crowd like flickering shadows. His gaze flicked sideways to a cluster of faces, each expression a muted echo of doubt, disbelief, even derision. The heavy hum of whispered critiques wrapped around Alex like an invisible noose, tightening with every passing second. His heart fluttered painfully, a fragile bird trapped beneath ribs too tight to breathe freely. His hands clenched into shaky fists, fingers ghosting over the splatters and strokes he had layered with late-night passion and desperation. The paintbrushes he carried felt as foreign in his grip as his own reflection seemed in the cracked mirror back home, a fractured identity, a dual existence splitting beneath his skin. A sharp knock on the glass nearly shattered his composure, drawing incredulous stares. The temperature seemed to dip, the air thickening with the unsaid. Somewhere, a subway rumbled beneath the city streets, its distant growl a reminder of relentless motion moving past him, leaving him frozen in a moment of suffocating stillness. A man, polished and self-assured, approached, his tone clipped and condescending. "You need to find a style that speaks beyond the obvious chaos. This isn't a phase worth prolonging." Alex swallowed the rising tide of humiliation, his breath catching, cheeks flushing with a dull, burning shame. He nodded, a hollow gesture that betrayed the storm behind his eyes. The crowd's focus shifted elsewhere, leaving him alone amid the sterile expanse. The canvas sat silent, its surface a mirror reflecting the duality tearing at his soul, the unyielding pressure of time, society, and the gnawing fear that his voice might never resonate. From his pocket, a folded note slipped unnoticed to the floor, the paper weathered, enigmatic, weighted with unseen promise. It fluttered like a whisper in the stale air, hinting at secrets and stories beyond the reach of the skeptical world. Alex sank slowly onto a nearby bench, vacant and cold. His gaze dropped to the note, fingers trembling as they brushed against its creases. The gallery's fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the fractured images of himself he struggled to reconcile. In that suspended moment, the bustling gallery faded to a muted hum, the world beyond the walls blurring into an indistinct haze. His reflection in the glass seemed to replay no longer just Alex Turner, but fragments, faces, and voices in spoken lives intertwined in the unseen ripple of existence. And as the note lay quietly by his side, the camera held close to his eyes deep pools of longing and fear poised at the fragile edge between defeat and the tantalizing possibility of escape. The city sprawled around Alex with its indifferent pulse, the familiar cacophony of distant sirens, muted horns, and hurried footsteps, a rhythmic reminder of a world moving swiftly on without him. Beneath the dense urban canopy, the streets shimmered under a cold wash of pale light, the desaturated tones of street lamps and neon signs casting sharp contrasts that seemed to sharpen the edges of Alex's solitude. His footsteps echoed hollowly in a near-empty alleyway, the clatter of loose trash and the distant rumble of a subway train underscoring the weight that pressed down on his lean frame. Alex's shoulders hunched inward as if shrinking beneath the invisible gaze of judgment, his unkempt hair falling loosely into eyes that struggled to hold a fractured sense of self together. The paint-splattered jacket that hung from his slender back was heavier than usual, a burden manifesting both physically and emotionally. Behind him, the gallery's folding doors were locked tight, its pristine white interior now a mausoleum for his shattered confidence. His latest piece, a canvas heavy with chaotic brushstrokes and muted colors, had become a weapon against Himmet's perceived failure, a mirror to his deepest fears. Passing under a flickering streetlight, Alex's hand brushed the worn fabric of his backpack where an aged, folded note tucked into a hidden pocket stirred faintly against his skin. A subtle weight, the note seemed almost to pulse with a life of its own, whispering promises just beyond reach. Breathing deeply into the chilly night, Alex rounded the corner toward a narrow park enveloped in shadows, the skeletal branches overhead etching delicate patterns against the faded sky. The quiet was suffocating, the absence of human noise emphasizing the isolation that had gripped him tighter than any judgment previously endured. His mind replayed familiar, cutting critiques whispered behind closed gallery doors and loud, public snickers that found purchase in his insecurities. Each word etched itself deeper until silence became heavier than sound. Down the street, a reflective glass storefront caught his weary gaze, and for a moment, his own fragmented image confronted him, a man divided, paint's smudged fingers hovering over brush handles, eyes hollow yet yearning, a face that trembled between despair and an unspoken plea for redemption. Shadows flickered across the glass as a distant figure approached, but before recognition could dawn, the figure melted into the bustling crowd, a ghost of the life he longed but feared to reclaim. He bent to retrieve the crumpled note that slipped to the cracked pavement. The paper was stained yet intact, a cryptic promise of escaped realities and hidden destinies folded within. The city's distant heartbeat throbbed in tandem with his own, a silent testament to a story on the edge of unraveling. Alex straightened slowly, a storm brewing beneath the calm exterior. His breath visible in the cool air, he felt the first fragile twitch of something unbroken, a spark amid ruin. As the screen pulled back, the city shimmered with muted lights behind him, a vast expanse of lives unseen and stories untold. Alex tucked the note securely back into his pocket, the pulse within steadying, and took a tentative step forward toward an uncertain dawn. Night had slipped over the city, folding its cold, muted blues and grays into the veins of concrete and steel. Alex Turner sat alone on a worn park bench beneath flickering streetlights that cast erratic shadows, struggling to breathe beneath the crushing weight of humiliation and doubt. The noises of the urban sprawl, the distant car horns, murmurs from late-night wanderers felt both distant and overwhelmingly close, each sound a reminder of a world moving forward without him. His gaze dropped to the well-worn pocket in his frayed jacket, fingers curling around the rough edge of the folded note unseen since it slipped silently into his possession. The paper was softer now, cradled like a fragile promise yet pungent with the strange power of the unknown. The note's mystery tugged at him, a quiet pulse beneath the trembling skin of his despair, hinting at secrets encrypted within his mundane existence. His eyes traced the faint outline of his reflection in a nearby rain-speckled window, a fractured double staring back. The lanky, paint-splattered figure seemed distant and strange, a man divided between worlds he could no longer reconcile, the weary artist at the edge of self-destruction, and the concealed door opening toward a reality few could glimpse. The city's stream of life continued, unceasing and indifferent, but Alex's world had begun to shift imperceptibly. The note whispered of a path beyond rejection, beyond the paralyzing ache of inadequacy. It was a subtle tremor in the fabric of his days, a fragile thread that beckoned him toward something raw and unfathomable. A sudden gust swept through the alley, rustling discarded papers and scattering dry leaves at his feet. The torn edges of his sketchbook peeked from his backpack, the images half-formed, dreams unmade. Among them, streaks of blue and black mingled with errant ink symbols of chaos trying to become order. Alex bent to pick up the lost sketch, his breath catching as a slip of paper fell from between the pages, a note, ancient-looking, weathered beyond reason. The inscription bore no date, only a cryptic phrase that chilled his blood, "Live beyond your reflection." That phrase ignited something deep, an ember of purpose beneath the swirling ash of self-doubt. His fingers steadied as he folded the paper carefully and slipped it alongside the other note in his pocket, the twin talismans of a life on the brink. As the fog thickened around the street lamp, its halo wavered, casting the world into a liminal space between regret and renewal. Alex stood, the city's restless heartbeat thrumming through his veins, a breath drawn tight between despair and fragile hope. The camera lingered on his face, eyes shadowed, searching, yet ignited by that first flicker of awakening. The reflection in the misted glass split and fractured, no longer just him alone but a mosaic of lives, possibilities, journeys. And as the night deepened, so did the silent call of the note, the beginning of a strange surrender to destiny, an embrace of the unreal that would shatter the boundaries of his existence. In the quiet tension of impending change, Alex took the first step forward, a solitary figure poised at the threshold of unknown lives waiting to be lived. The city dawned in a gray wash, the streets slick with early morning rain that mirrored the turmoil pooling inside Alex's chest. The air was thick with mist, blurring the sharp edges of buildings and drowning familiar sounds in a damp, distant hum. He walked briskly, the muffled slap of his worn sneakers against cracked pavement a counterpoint to the erratic beating of his heart. The note in his pocket pressed cold and crisp against his thigh, a quiet beacon amid the flooding doubts that threatened to consume him. Clad in his paint-splattered jacket, the weight of his backpack heavy with brushes, tubes of paint, and sketchbooks teetering between chaos and creation reminded him of the unending battle between yielding and fighting back. He paused beside a shattered mirror embedded in the side of a graffiti-stained building, a fractured reflection staring back at him. His image wavered, multiplied, merged, a collage of faces blurred by raindrops trickling down the glass. For a fleeting moment, he touched the cold surface, tracing the jagged lines that fissured his own likeness, feeling the echo of duality, the struggle between the self he had been and the self he was fighting to become. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint strains of a distant saxophone, soulful and raw, an imperfect melody threading through the city's muted pulse. Alex closed his eyes, letting the music anchor him amid the storm. His thoughts circled the note once again, a mysterious message that had jolted his already fractured reality. With tentative resolve, he unfolded it in the muted light of an abandoned subway station, its sparse morning commuters unaware of the fragile secret pulsing in their midst. The ink traced silent promises, an invitation to live beyond fear, to find meaning in borrowed time. For a brief, piercing moment, Alex imagined stepping into another life, another world where his art could thrive unshackled by self-doubt and public scorn. The chill of the station seeped through his clothes as a train rumbled past, its roar a rushing cascade of blurred faces and fleeting moments, reminders of all he longed yet feared. His grip tightened on the note, fingers trembling with a mix of anticipation and dread. He glanced up, catching the eye of an elderly man waiting nearby, the man's gaze steady and knowing. Without a word, the man gave a subtle note and spoke an understanding. It was as though the city, in its harsh and indifferent rhythm, acknowledged Alex's silent battle and the faint ripples of hope stirring beneath. A solitary raindrop trickled down and landed on the note, distorting the fine script, one word becoming blurred but still haunting: begin. Alex exhaled slowly, the breath of fragile release, bracing for the uncertain journey that beckoned him forward. The camera lingered on the note, soaked but unyielding, as the screen faded to black, a threshold poised on the edge of transformation and shadows yet to be unraveled. Beneath the overcast sky that draped the city in sheets of muted gray, Alex wandered the damp streets with a restless pulse echoing within his chest. The night had faded but left the world soaked, glistening under the unforgiving glare of streetlights that cast long, hollow shadows on the pavement. Each step resonated with a grinding uncertainty, the brittle promise sparked by the note now tangled with a suffocating tension he could no longer ignore. The weight of living in another man's skin grew heavier with every passing day, his reflection fragmented and dissonant in the mirrored windows he passed, each glance a fragmented reminder of a life borrowed, a self increasingly lost. Paintbrushes tucked into his tangled hair and worn backpack now felt less like tools of creation and more like the chains of a delicate identity slipping through his fingers. His tenuous grip on hope faltered as fractured whispers of doubt surged, Had he traded one prison for another? The brief victories in his assumed lifework appreciated, fleeting smiles, moments of belonging were corrupted by the creeping sense of betrayal, a gnawing suspicion that this borrowed identity was a brittle house balanced on a foundation of sand. A cold gust sliced through the street, lifting scraps of paper into a spiraling dance. Among them, a torn fragment from one of his own sketches fluttered near his feet, rain-dotted and ghost-like. He bent, heart aching, to gather a fragile remnant of himself, torn and fading in the storm. Have you ever felt like you're nowhere and everywhere? Alex's voice broke the quiet, scanning empty eyes of a passerby who offered no answer but a curt nod, swallowed quickly by the distance. The city's pulse quickened, cars rushed past, voices rose and fell, strangers brushed against him, their faces blurring like indistinct echoes of a life he no longer knew. The private life he'd left behind called in muted rumblings, a forgotten phone, a name, an urgent question he dared not answer. A sudden vibration shattered the fragile stillness. His phone. The screen flashed an unknown number, a chilling voice lancing through the receiver. "Where are you? We need to talk." His breath caught, the weight of two existences colliding with brutal clarity. Steeling himself, Alex lifted his gaze to the slick pavement reflecting garish neon, a distorted mosaic of identity and illusion. The note in his pocket vibrated faintly, as if alive and aware of his fractured soul. Time fractured again, memories flickered like fractured mirrors. The man whose life he inhabited, the family he met with hesitant warmth, the demand for truth lurking beneath their eyes. Each revelation a jagged stone in a path littered with fractured selves. "Who am I really?" he whispered, voice trembling in the chill air. The camera captured his silhouette against the glowing cityscape, isolated, conflicted, a man caught in the liminal space between borrowed life and self. As rain began to sprinkle softly, blurring the edges of reality, Alex hesitated at a crossroads. The weight of expectation, betrayal, and a desperate hope hung palpably, a fragile moment suspended between disintegration and awakening. The screen faded slowly to black, leaving the question echoing. How far would he go to reclaim his true self before he lost it entirely? The city's chill seeped through the cracks of the aged apartment's windows, whispering cold into the dim room where Alex sat, the weight of the borrowed life pressing heavily upon him. His fingers curled tightly around the mysterious note still tucked deep within his jacket pocket, the thin, fragile paper that had quietly rewritten the trajectory of his existence. Outside, the rain fell in soft, ceaseless sheets, echoing the turmoil boiling beneath his skin. The spacious loft, once a studio pulsing with boundless creativity, now felt cavernous and sterile, every surface glossed with sterility and disconnect. Blank canvases crowded the corners, a gallery of abandoned aspirations. Paintbrushes lay scattered on tables, some dried and cracked, symbols of battles waged and lost between his vivid inner worlds and the unforgiving realm of reality. Alex's gaze fell on a cracked mirror propped against an exposed brick wall, catching a fractured version of himself. Not one face but two. The artist drowning in self-doubt and the shadowed figure of the man whose life he had stepped into by veiled design. Each reflection blurred into the next, a ghostly dance of shifting identities. The phone chimed sharply, jarring the oppressive quiet. His heart snapped as he saw the unknown number flashing an urgent voice from the life he no longer fully controlled. Hesitating, he answered. "Where have you been?" The voice was threaded with worry and something else, an accusation perhaps, or a fear of loss. "We're all waiting. You can't disappear like this." Alex swallowed hard. "I'm figuring things out," he whispered, the words feeling hollow. As the call ended, the note in his pocket burned against his side, an almost living pulse urging him forward yet warning of shadows lurking in the borrowed skin. He slumped into a chair, breath shallow, guilt and confusion knotting inside. His thoughts spiraled back to a recent encounter, the man whose life he now inhabited. The ride in the dim car, the reluctant admission of a fractured existence straining under secrets. The man's hollow eyes held mirrors of Alex's own growing despair, the shared knowledge that this borrowed life might be as much a prison as a refuge. A sudden movement caught his eye, the note slipping from his pocket, unfolding on the hardwood floor. He bent to retrieve it, eyes wide as fresh words appeared unseen before, etched by some enigmatic hand. "Truth is not a sanctuary," the script read, "but a crucible. To choose is to burn." Alex's breath hitched. In that moment, the fragile veil shielding him from unbearable truths shattered. He realized the life he had borrowed was tethered not only to hope but to sacrificeto choices that would irreversibly redraw the map of his identity. The room's light faltered as warring shadows twined across the walls, mirroring the storm raging within. The city beyond thundered its unyielding rhythm, relentless and indifferent, as the deeply personal battle raged silent. Alex stood, the early dawn reddening the horizon, silhouette stark against the windowpane. His eyes, now sharpened with painful clarity, held the quiet fire of acceptance and determination. If he was to reclaim his life, to truly live beyond borrowed breaths, he must face the truths lurking in the shadows, no matter how searing the cost. The camera held on the unsteady reflection in the fractured mirror, two selves merging into one before fading to black, the relentless ticking of a distant clock marking the fragile heartbeat of a new beginning. The city breathed shallowly in the late hours, its streets slick with rain and gleaming under the weak glow of flickering street lamps. Alex stood by the rain-draped window of his sparse apartment, the muted light casting ghostly reflections across his gaunt face. His silhouette, tall and lanky, was swallowed by shadows that pressed against the cracked glass, mirroring the oppressive weight that settled deep within his chest. His eyes, once bright with restless fire, now flickered with a hollow weariness as he fingered the worn note tucked in his jacket pocket, the strange talisman that had pulled him from the depths of despair and into a tangled web of borrowed lives. The note's edges were frayed, the ink smudged, yet it resonated with unsettling clarity, a promise of meaning and redemption entwined with shadowed secrets. The room was silent but for the distant hum of the city sirens wailing in the distance, the faint murmur of footsteps on rain-slick streets, the harsh rhythm of tires cutting through puddles. Yet within Alex's mind, the silence was suffocating, a suffocating silence filled with the echoes of fractured identities and mounting betrayals. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall, framed by peeling wallpaper. Alex approached it slowly, breath shallow and ragged, and stared deeply into his own reflection. But it was fragmented, his image splintered and distorted like shards of glass, each facet reflecting a different version of himself. The man who dreamed bravely. The man who stumbled. The transient ghost of a borrowed life. Lightning traced jagged veins across the sky, illuminating the darkened room in brief bursts. Suddenly, the hum of his phone shattered the stillness, a call from the life he no longer fully commanded. His hands trembled as he lifted the receiver. "Where are you?" said the voice on the other end, strained, anxious, laced with a mixture of fear and accusation. "People are worried. We're running out of time." Alex swallowed hard. "I'm here. I'm trying," he whispered, the words barely audible shadows. The call ended, the room dipping again into silence as his heartbeat thudded unevenly. He crumpled to the floor, the note slipping from his fingers and folding open, revealing a cryptic new message he hadn't seen before. The ink seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow. "Truth demands sacrifice. Will you surrender or seize control?" The air grew heavy, as if the walls drew closer, pressing against his skin, drowning the remaining fragments of hope. His breath caught, the loneliness and fear intertwined in a choking embrace. His eyes drifted to the paintbrushes resting idle on the floor, tools that once sang with life now mute and forgotten. They lay across blank canvases, a still life of faltering dreams. Alex's whisper broke through the crushing silence. "Who am I, if not lost?" The camera lingered on his fractured reflection in the mirror, a haunting mosaic of identities before fading slowly into darkness, the relentless ticking of the pocket watch echoing like a dying heartbeat. And as the storm outside raged against the city's fragile walls, so too did the storm within Alex rage quiet, suffocating, on the brink of shattering all that remained. The city's skeletal skyscrapers stretched cold and unforgiving beneath a slate-gray sky, their windows like vacant eyes staring down at Alex's solitary figure. He walked slowly, each footfall swallowed by damp concrete echoing in the hollow urban canyons. The air was sharp, slicing through his thin jacket, every breath a fractured ritual of existence as the night settled thick around him. Beneath the flickering street lamp, Alex paused, trembling fingers fishing the dog-eared note from deep within his paint-splattered jacket pocket. The worn paper felt impossibly fragile, a ghostly talisman tethered to a life he could barely grasp. The faded ink seemed to pulse faintly in the weak light, whispering promises blurred by his unraveling mind. His gaze flickered to a shattered mirror embedded in the glass facade of a deserted storefront. His reflection fractured into shards, ghostly images of a man divided, caught between the artifice of borrowed existence and the void of his own forgotten self. The figure staring back was a collage of doubt, remorse, and piercing loneliness. A chill wind teased the edges of his loosely spun hair, brushing against hollowed cheeks stained with the tracing of sleepless nights and countless tears. Around him, the city stirred faintly, a distant siren, an errant car alarm, the soft murmur of hushed conversations, an oral tapestry that mocked the silence consuming his spirit. In the weightless pause of night, there came the faint, haunting echo of a ticking pocket watch, slow and irregular, as if time itself had splintered. Alex's eyes fell to his trembling hand. Empty now, the note that had sustained him vanished like a breath exhaled into darkness. He sank to the cold pavement, knees drawn tight, the world contracting into an isolated bubble painted with stark hues of isolation. Around him, fragments of failed dreams and unspoken regrets swirled in the wet shadows like ash-mute remnants of a flame extinguished too soon. His voice, cracked and barely more than a whisper, reached into the void. "Who am I, when all the pieces fall away?" Silence answered back, a sprawling, suffocating quiet that wrapped around his trembling form. The neon glow of a distant sign flickered its last, casting elongated silhouettes that danced like ghosts fleeing the light. Alex's breathing slowed, the ragged rhythm flattening into stillness. The pulse of the city dimmed, leaving only the echoed beat of a heart on the verge of surrender. His eyes closed, the fractured mirror images fading into a void where identity dissolved, and only the stark edges of emptiness remained. The camera lingered on his silhouette, hunched and alone beneath the cracked street lamp, before slowly pulling up to reveal the sprawling labyrinth of shadows, a labyrinth of lost lives, fractured selves, and stories whispered into the creeping night. And in that vast, indistinct darkness, with the last flicker of hope snuffed by the relentless march of time, Alex teetered on the brink, silent, unseen, utterly broken. The night pressed heavily against the city, a suffocating velvet darkness swallowed only by the distant, flickering glow of a lone street lamp. Alex sat on the cracked windowsill of his tiny apartment, the window's cold glass pressing against his damp forehead as he stared into the void beyond. The city's familiar cacophony was muted here, replaced by an eerie stillness broken only by the relentless tick of a tarnished pocket watch clasped tightly in his palm. Each tick sounded like the slow heartbeat of a life unraveling. His frame was hunched, shoulders trembling with a fragility that belied the chaos within. The worn note, the catalyst, and the cursor stood now folded, its edges softened by countless anxious fingers. Its cryptic promises whispered through the dark silence, a subtle pulse beneath the despair. In the corner, the paintbrushes lay scattered on a cracked tabletop, dried paint caking their bristles like the residue of forgotten dreams. Their stillness was a sharp contrast to the turbulent storm within Alex, caught between faces reflected in fragmented mirrors that lined the walls, faces not quite his own, but echoes, shadows that spoke of stolen lives and hidden selves. A faint melody seeped through the thin waltz, an old jazz tune playing softly on a distant radio, weaving a fragile thread of warmth into the cold air. Alex's eyes closed, his breath hitching as memories wove through him, childhood laughter, a fleeting smile, fingers stained with paint from days long past. Slowly, trembling, he reached to a small shelf where aged photographs rested. One image caught his eye, a family portrait from decades ago, faces frozen in sepia tones. Among them, a reflection of himself, though the moment and the lives remained a mystery. His fingers brushed the photograph softly, feeling the faint imprint of time. His lips parted in a whisper, barely audible above the ticking watch. "I am more than the sum of their eyes." The room seemed to breathe with him, shadows lifting slightly, as subtle warmth crept into the darkness. The old clock on the wall, silent for so long, clicked softly, its hands inching forward with steady resolve, marking a moment of fragile awakening. Alex slowly rose, the weight of despair giving way to a tentative determination. He pulled the note from his pocket, fingertips grazing its surface, the cryptic message now less ominous, more a beacon. A faint smile brushed his lips, a single, tentative gesture of hope. The camera lingered on his reflection in the window, a man emerging from the shrouds of lost selves, eyes clear for the first time, not just with his own image but with the echoes of the lives he had touched. And as dawn's first light bled softly into the sky, the scene held a quiet promise, a beginning born from the depths of night, tilting toward the light to come. The room, once overshadowed by despair's heavy shroud, now slowly filled with a gentle, golden hue as dawn seeped through the cracked window, casting warm rays onto the scattered remnants of Alex's life. The air was thick with hope, fragile yet undeniable, a delicate shift awakening deep within him. He sat at his cluttered easel, the paintbrushes resting motionless in his hand, as if waiting for permission to breathe again. A soft, almost imperceptible hum of life stirred in the quieton, awakening from the long, dark night of doubt. The shadows that had clung so desperately to the corners retreated, replaced by a whisper of light that danced across the peeling walls, illuminating broken frames and unused canvases, transforming chaos into a field of potential. Alex's gaze lingered on a small, battered mirror propped on a side table, its surface cracked and streaked. He hesitated, then slowly lifted it, eyes searching his reflection, no longer the distorted face shaped by fear and failure but a visage trembling with curiosity and a flicker of renewed purpose. The cool glass reflected not just his features but a fragment of resiliency, an echo of the artist he once was and still could become. His breath, ragged and shallow for so long, now eased into a steady rhythm. He reached out and traced the faint lines of a worn, inked note tucked into his pocket, the message that had begun his journey and now seemed to pulse with new meaning, a subtle heartbeat calling him forward. The muted colors of dawn seeped into the room, blending hues of amber and rose, gently dissolving the cold, desaturated darkness that dominated his world. Fresh hope stirred, casting a delicate glow over the clutter, a silent hymn to rebirth. His hand hovered above an untouched palette, trembling with the first instinct to create, to heal, to reclaim. A gentle smile broke across his face, tentative yet genuine, a beacon amidst the fragile calm now blooming within. The canvases around him, once abandoned, seemed to breathe anew, inviting him to paint not just images but the truth buried beneath layers of doubt. Alex's eyes closed for a moment, savoring this fragile awakening, a whisper of dawn after a long, relentless night. The quiet hum of possibility filled the space, soft but insistent, a foreshadow of the strength he would need to persevere. And as he reached into his backpack, pulling out a brush with a hesitant hand, the scene lingered on his poised figure, guided by a newfound resolve, yet aware that this was merely the first step on a path still shrouded in uncertainty, beckoning him toward a destiny he was only beginning to see. The dawn washing over the city cast a soft glow through the attic window as Alex sat alone amidst the relics of a life reborn from the depths of despair. His hands trembled as he carefully placed the heirloom, a delicate, ancient pendant, upon a newly cleared surface. The object, shimmering with subtle light, seemed to pulse with newfound purpose, a silent emblem of the journey from darkness into dawn. The room was awash with hues of amber and pink, a stark contrast to the cold, desaturated tone that had dominated his world. Here, in this sacred space, shadows receded, giving way to gentle warmth that seeped into every corner, a silent testament to inner awakening. Alex's eyes, once haunted by doubt and regret, now reflected a spark and ember of hope that flickered and grew with each passing moment. He moved deliberately, reaching into a worn backpack from which art supplies peeked out: brushes, paints, and sketches, now chosen with mindful intention. His fingers grasped a brush, the bristles pristine, inviting an act of creation, an act of liberation. A deep breath steadied him as he dipped the brush into the palette, the colors vibrant, alive with possibilities. As he traced gentle strokes on an empty canvas in front of him, an aura of silent affirmation filled the space. Each movement was purposeful, a deliberate assertion that he was reclaiming his voice, his story. In the quiet, the subtle hum of an awakening city seeped in: distant footsteps, a whisper of wind through open windows. Yet within this room, a universe of transformation thrived. The faintest glow of the rising sun spilled into the room, illuminating the walls lined with sketches of faces and places touched by his hand, a tapestry of lives connected through unseen threads. Alex paused, eyes closing briefly as he felt the connection: past and present, borrowed and his own, all woven into the act of creation. The note in his pocket, once a symbol of entropy, now thrummed with renewed life, an unspoken promise that he was not alone in this voyage. He lifted his brush again, the first true stroke a delicate bridge from despair to hope. The room seemed to hold its breath, the muted colors giving way to brighter, more confident hues. The shadows, once oppressive, receded into the edges of perception, replaced by a luminous clarity. A faint smile curled his lips, an incision into the weight of the night, now lifting as dawn's promise unfurled. In this moment of poetic rebirth, Alex understood that the journey was far from over, but the first steps had been taken: bold, purposeful, and profoundly necessary. The camera panned out slowly, capturing the quiet act of creation, the portrait of a man reborn, before softening into the light, a silent ode to hope amidst uncertainty. The sunlight spilled into the attic, gilding the scattered relics of a life long past, transforming shadows into shimmering hues of gold and amber. Alex stood motionless amidst the relics, a silhouette carved in the dawn's quiet symphony. His gaze, once clouded with despair and confusion, now radiated a calm resolve, a transformation born from the depths of darkness. He reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the worn surface of the heirloom pendant, a delicate yet powerful link to the woven tapestry of lives tangled within him. The weight of the past, once an oppressive burden, was now a luminous thread connecting him to those who had come before, to the infinite stories that shimmered beneath the surface of existence. The shadows lingered at the edges, but no longer held dominion. Instead, they bowed gently to the new dawn, an acknowledgement of the emergence of a reborn spirit from the ashes of despair. The flickering light traced the lines of his face, etched with pain, yes, but also illuminated by the unshakable presence of purpose. A soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the sacred song of awakening and justice. The mural of faces painted on the walls, a testament to the lives touched and touched by him, seemed to resonate with a silent chorus of salvation. The scattered paints and abandoned brushes now beckoned him, a canvas of hope waiting to be reborn. In the stillness, Alex's lips parted in a gentle, unwavering smile, a silent vow to embrace his truth and forge a future rooted in the interconnected harmony of all lives touched. His voice, steady yet filled with primal conviction, broke the dawn. I am more than the echoes of failure and doubt. I am the story of resilience, the voice beyond silence. The camera lingered on his face, an image of pure transformation as he slowly turned, bathed in the luminous glow of the rising sun. Every step forward was an act of reclaiming, a courageous leap into the uncharted waters of purpose and justice. The scene broadened, engulfing the attic, now shimmering with light, each relic, each face, now a luminous monument of hope and interconnectedness. The shadows bowed in reverence as Alex's figure became one with the dawn, a peaceful warrior ready to confront whatever remnants of darkness still lurked beyond the horizon. The room was bathed in the tender glow of dawn, soft rays slipping through the sheer curtains, illuminating a space brimming with quiet revelations. Alex sat upright on the edge of his bed, cradling the portrait he'd painted, an assemblage of faces from lives he had touched, woven together in a delicate tapestry of hope and loss. His fingers brushed over the canvas, tracing the interconnected lines and memories etched into every stroke. The cool scent of morning air mingled with the faint aroma of paints, a symbolic scent of rebirth, a gentle reminder that beauty can emerge from chaos. Around him, relics of past lives, the photographs, the heirloom, the scattered sketches laid peacefully, each a testament to a journey of understanding and acceptance. His eyes, once clouded with doubt and despair, shimmered with a quiet serenity. The haunted shadows that lingered in their depths had begun to lift, replaced by a soft, luminous clarity and inward dawn that transcended the fractured selves he once grappled with. A delicate smile crossed his lips as he stood, the faintest tremor of surrender in his movement. His expression was a mirror of profound reconciliation, recognizing that every trace of pain, failure, and regret had led him here, still standing, still learning, still healing. The camera lingered on his face, encapsulating the beginning of a new chapter. With deliberate, gentle steps, Alex approached the window, pushing aside the curtain to look out over the awakening cityscape. The streets breathed anew beneath the delicate light of the rising sun, its warmth a silent promise of hope and the endless potential for renewal. He turned back to the room, his sanctuary, breathing deeply, feeling the tranquility seep into every fiber of his being. The echoes of lives lived and touched haunted him no longer as ghosts of the past but as whispers of lessons learned and bridges built. In that moment of stillness, Alex embraced his new clarity, a profound acceptance of his journey, an acknowledgement of his intertwined destinies. The portrait, a silent testament to the interconnectedness of all lives, hung quietly on the wall, a symbol of hope and universal compassion. A gentle wind stirred the curtains, symbolizing beyond the window an unseen current guiding him forward. The scene faded into a peaceful silence, a visual pause heralding a future born from the ashes of despair, a space where hope and identity could finally coexist. The gentle amber glow of the late afternoon seeped through the attic's windows, casting a warm, forgiving light across the scattered remnants of a tumultuous journey. Alex stood quietly, a slight smile on his lips, as he gazed at the portrait hanging on the wall, a mosaic of faces from the lives he'd touched, woven together into a poignant testament of interconnectedness. His hand brushed softly over the canvas, feeling the textured surface, each face whispering silent stories of pain, hope, and redemption. In that luminous stillness, he recognized the truth that the fractured mirror of his soul had long refused to accept: that every life, every face, every moment was a vital thread in the tapestry of his existence. The old, tarnished pocket watch hung silently from a hookah, symbol of the relentless march of time, now understood as a vessel of shared human stories, not a chain of regret. The room breathed an aura of serenity, colors warmed from cool, desaturated tones, rising in gentle hues of dawn. Shadows, once oppressive, receded into the corners, surrendering to the light of understanding. Alex's eyes closed briefly, a deep, resonant breath filling his chest, a moment of pure, unadulterated forgiveness and release. He moved towards the small collection of relics, a faded photograph of a woman from a bygone era, a worn heirloom, sketches from past lives, and gently touched each one, silent acknowledgments flowing effortlessly, as if blending into the very air of peace. The weight of loneliness and despair had dissolved into this sacred space of acceptance. His hands clasped the pendant, lifting it in reverence, feeling the delicate weight of belonging, an unspoken promise that every life touched was a gift, every loss a lesson. The distance from his former doubts stretched thin, replaced by a serene conviction that true recognition lay in embracing all his truths, past, present, and future. With deliberate intention, Alex stepped back, his figure bathed in the amber glow, embodying the dawn of renewal. His gaze lingered on the portrait, a silent vow etched into the quiet air that he would honor the interconnected threads that made him whole. The room seemed to hold its breath, the shadows giving way to a luminous, eternal calm. A faint breeze stirred the curtains, symbolizing the unseen currents guiding him toward this new beginning, peace born from understanding, love rooted in empathy, and identity finally woven into a light that no darkness could dim. The attic glowed with the tender hues of sunset, soft amber spilling through the cracked window, casting gentle shadows across the faces and relics that now stood as silent witnesses to a journey of profound transformation. Alex, seated quietly in the midst of it all, gently traced the contours of the portrait, a mosaic of touched lives, a testament to compassion, acceptance, and inevitable change. His hands moved with reverence, fingers caressing the features of faces he'd once feared he'd never truly understand but now knelt before with an open heart. The room was imbued with a sacred stillness. The flickering light danced on the surfaces, illuminating the intricate layers of past and present, each symbol within the space whispering stories of resilience. The tarnished pocket watch, a relic of relentless time, hung still, its faded face reflecting the tranquil serenity now etched in Alex's gaze. He gazed at the canvas, the faces he touched swirling in a harmonious blend, each a fragment of collective humanity, woven together through silent empathy and the unspoken acknowledgement that all lives are interconnected strands in the tapestry of existence. The echoes of failures, fears, and darkness had softened, dissolving into the luminous glow of understanding. In a silent gesture, Alex tilted his face toward the open window, basking in the last light of Diane, in spoken prayer for peace, for acceptance, for the quiet dignity of interwoven stories. The breeze brushed softly through the attic, stirring the corners of relics and memories, as if nature itself honored this quiet moment of release. A gust of wind carried away the last dregs of darkness, leaving behind a tranquil silence, a space of enduring peace, an eternal emblem of reconciliation. His eyes closed briefly, breathing in the warmth of gratitude, of forgiveness, of letting go. The surface of the portrait shimmered faintly, an everlasting testament to lives intertwined, an ode to the human spirit. As dusk deepened into night, the attic remained a shining sanctuary, a haven where broken fragments of identity had merged into a peaceful, luminous whole. The camera lingered on Alex's serene face, the soft glow illuminating his features, a quiet, enduring symbol of hope, compassion, and the eternal journey toward self and shared understanding. The scene faded into a gentle, cinematic pause, pure, unspoken peace. What would you do if a note showed you another life? Share your thoughts.